CollectAWrestlePalooza. CollectAWrestlePalooza.
What's up, everyone? It's Tom from CollectAWrestlePalooza. How you doing? Today's hobby tips and thoughts video is going to be discussing two business fundamentals: inventory valuation and inventory turnover. I use those two metrics to understand how I'm doing, and I think it can help you too. I've always said it's important to think of the hobby as a business. You want to set honest and realistic goals for yourself, and you also want to see how the capital expenditure is performing. This is something you're spending money on, and you want to get something back if possible. So this is a simple template, a spreadsheet that is similar to the one that I use to track my inventory and to understand how it's doing. So let's start on the far left here. Your first column is going to be purchase date. You want to put what day you bought the item. Second column is going to be the description of the item. In this case, I just said Hulk Hogan Classic PSA 8, cool card. Cost, $23.50. You want to include there taxes, fees, freight, all in, your capital expenditure. Of course, if you have a resale certificate and you're not paying sales tax on the purchase, you're not going to include that. But if you are paying sales tax on the purchase, that's a capital expenditure. That's money you're not getting back. So that's part of what you're spending on the card. This next column here, I'm calling it inventory. So basically this is a toggle. If I double click here, you can see what cells it's referencing, and I'll tell you a little bit about the logic. The logic is basically saying if cell I6 is null, if there's nothing in there, then you're going to want to reference cell F6, which is the cost. Otherwise, it's zero. So what that's saying is if there is nothing in the payout, this is part of your inventory. If there's something in the payout, this is not part of your inventory. In other words, if you sold the card, it's no longer a part of your inventory. But if you have not sold the card, it is part of your inventory. Target selling price here. What I'm doing is I'm looking at what my target markup is, and I'm saying after fees, how much do I want to sell this item for so that I can make 50% of my cost as profit. So the logic here is saying it equals F6, which is the cost, times 1 plus G2, and G2 is the target markup. So I'm saying 150% because my target markup is 50%. 1 plus that would be 150%, divided by the percent value of what I'm going to get after fees. So 1 minus the eBay fees. So if eBay fees are 12%, what that means is if you divide that number by 0.88, that is how much you're going to need to sell the item for, so that after the 12% fees are taken out, you have 88% left. You're still going to make your profit, which is 50% of the target markup. Payout here, and what I'm doing for my payout, what you would enter in is you'd enter it in manually. You would look on eBay or whatever selling site and say, this is the money that's going into my account. But the way I have it set up here is I'm sort of evaluating what my payout is based on this target selling price. If I actually sold it for $40.06, my target, and then I had to pay the 12% eBay fees, I'm saying $40.06 times 1 minus 12%. So I'm saying 88% of $40.06, which is what I'd get after they subtract 12%, is $35.25. So my payout was $35.25. And the profit on that is $11.75. That's an easy sell, which is I6 minus F6, payout minus cost. And you can see that this works out. So my spreadsheet is calculating this correctly because the profit of $11.75, if I do that and divide it by the cost, it's 50%. It's the exact target markup that I was going after. So this is referencing that if I sold it for $40.06, I paid 12% eBay fees. My profit is $11.75, which is 50% of my target markup. Days held, I'm saying, equals today, which is an Excel function, today, minus D6. So I'm saying what is today's date minus the purchase date, 44 days. And as we get further into these financial metrics, if I make more of these videos, I will show you how to evaluate if 44 days of $23.50 inventory is good or bad, or what's the return on that investment. In other words, the way to think of it is you say, I spent $23.50 on this wrestling card. I could have put that same money into a bank and gotten 1% interest. I could have put it into stocks and maybe get 10% interest or dividends or what have you on it. Or I could have put it into some sort of alternative investment. And was my investment in wrestling cards worth it, considering that I had to tie up that money for 44 days in order to get my profit? But going back to inventory and inventory turnover, let's add a couple more items here. And let's not fill in all of the cells, but just the important ones for those two metrics. So say on the 10th, I bought a Ric Flair Wonderama card. I paid $19 for it. Now for this one here, notice it's not formatted well. I like to just use this $sign up in the Excel workbook itself. That gives me a nice format for money. Inventory, I'm actually going to take this cell and copy it down. So now you notice that the inventory is $19 because I have not sold it yet. In other words, if I have a payout, then inventory is nothing because I received money for it, which implies I sold the card. If there's nothing in this cell, then the inventory is $19. Just for the heck of it, I'm going to pull this one down here to show my target selling price. So I'd want to sell this one for $32.39. Oh, excuse me. And then these two cells here, I can also pull down, which will show me, right now, of course, my profit is negative 19 because I haven't received any money for it, and I've paid $19 and I've held it for 36 days. Let's add another item here. So 5/1/22. I bought a big card here. Let's say I bought a 1982 Andre the Giant Raw. That's a Wrestling All-Stars card, so that cost me $945. Again, I'm going to want to change my format to that nice format. Let's pull these cells down. And let's do one more card here. 5/3/22. I bought a 1987 Honky Tonk Man Topps card. I paid $31 for it. And again, let's copy our cells down. So now I'm going to sum up a few of the columns so that we can understand just so it's a little easier on the eyes. I'm going to use the auto sum there, which will nicely calculate these for us. I'm going to tell you what each of these sums means. So these are the important columns that can be summed. So let's look here. So I paid $1,018.50. That's my capital expenditure over this time. My inventory is $995, which basically means of that $1,018.50, I've sold that one card for $23.50. My payout was $35.25 on that $23.50 card. My profit, of course, is negative at this point because I've spent more than I've sold. Now, what does this mean? Let's talk about inventory turnover. All right, so inventory turnover is going to look at your average inventory over a period, and it is going to say how many times did that inventory turn during that period. So let's look at the course of a year. And let's say that, you know, your starting inventory, I'll put it down here. The beginning of a year using this was $200. Your ending inventory is this, $995. Your average inventory equals this minus this. Or excuse me, your average inventory is the average of those two. I don't know why I did that. So it equals this plus this divided by 2. So during that time, you had $597.50 of inventory on average. And then you're going to want to say your sales during that period. And you're going to want to do your sales at cost. You're not going to want to do your sales at retail, because you want to know the performance of how many times that turned at cost, at the capital expenditure. Everything else is profit. So your sales during this time were, well, in this case, it was $23.50, but that's your sales at cost. But let's say during this whole period, you also sold $1,000 worth of cards, which are not tracked here. So your sales are $1,023.50. Then your turnover equals sales divided by average inventory. Turnover is 1.71. So that's essentially the velocity of your capital expenditure. So let's think about this for a second. During that time, the average amount of money you spent was $597.50. That's the average amount of money that you had in your inventory that was locked up in that, not being sold. Once you sold that item, that capital expenditure goes back into your pocket, plus your profit. During that same period, you sold $1,023.50 worth, and that's at cost, remember. So that means you turned that capital expenditure 1.7 times, approximately, during that period. Is that good? Is that bad? That's up to you. But I think that that's probably not a bad metric. So that means that if you wanted to spend $500, then that $500 would turn over 1.7 times during that period. So again, in subsequent videos, if people like this way of looking at it, I will talk a little bit more about some of the other financial metrics and if that's good or bad. But this is a good start. This is a good way for you to start to look at what you're spending, and if you're spending it on something that's giving back to you and how often it's giving back to you during that period. Thanks again for watching. This is CollectAWrestlePalooza. Have a great week.